I was telling my dad this earlier, we have a population crisis. And a large part of it, I think, is because men are demonized so heavily and fatherhood is treated as a joke in most society. You watch any random movie, he's the guy with the white socks and sandals who's only good at barbecuing. That's his only contribution to the world.
Father was an absolute mentor to me, a leader in everything he did. He was actually a captain in the Army, and I was always grateful to have a good father in my life. And my greatest aspiration was to be a good father myself.
You're a man living in the modern world in a time when men and manhood are not what they once were. You live life on your own terms. You're self-sufficient. You think for yourself and you march to the beat of your own drum. When life knocks you down, you get back up because in your gut, you know that's what men do. You're a badass and a warrior. And on the days when you forget, we are here to remind you who you really are.
Welcome to Sovereign Man Podcast, where we aim to make men masculine again. I'm your man, Nicky Ballou, and we have two very special guests here today, a father and a son, Cameron and Brunson Smith. Welcome, men.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great to see you again, Nicky.
Good to see you too. So I decided to bring you two men on the show because Brunson and I had an interview on another show where he waxed poetic about what an incredible father he has and how much he'd learned from his father about how to be a man, how to be effective in business. And I just thought to myself, it'd be really cool to interview a father and a son on this show and have them share the dynamics of their relationship with us in real time. So, Cameron, why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell us your story and how you came into the fatherhood journey and how you've chosen to be as a father with Brunson and with your other kids?
Yeah, so I guess I'd just go back to my own father. I was blessed with an amazing father. I'm the youngest of a large family. I'm 6 boys and 4 girls. I'm 10. The youngest. Yeah, 10
wow.
Total, but six boys and 4 girls. So, yeah, and my father was an absolute mentor to me. He was a leader in everything he did. He was actually a captain in the Army and in World War II. And so I'm quite a bit younger than he was, and just always admired him, and I was always grateful to have a good father in my life. And so my greatest aspiration was to be a good father myself.
That's good. So at what age did you become a father for the first time?
I became
and how did you go about?
Yeah, so I married when I was just almost 24, and we didn't wait. We went right after it and started our family. And so I was a father at 24, and just loved the experience from the very beginning. Just a great. It was a great opportunity for me. I saw it as a complete blessing to be a father.
So how did you go about navigating the journey of fatherhood? And how has it been in terms of your relationship with Brunson?
You know, I took it as it came, quite honestly, because I had an amazing experience with a loving father and mother in my home. I had a good pattern to follow, and that's how I began, was emulating them the best I knew how, and had a lot of support from my parents, and when we got into it, I had, because of my age and the my dad was 50 years older than I, and so all of my brothers and sisters had already started their families, or most of them had. And so I had an opportunity as a young man to be an uncle and spent a lot of time with my brothers and sisters' children, and so it came quite naturally to me. I was kind of mentored in it my whole life, to where when I had the opportunity to be a father myself, it seemed very natural for me.
So you had good examples from your own father and from your brothers, your older brothers, on what
Yes.
fatherhood was like. They modeled it for you. So you basically
That's
kind
right.
of did a bit of monkey see, monkey do. You saw what they did, and that's the way you went forward.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I had many good examples around me, and just was so close to all of them that it just felt like the next logical step in my life was to become a father after I was married.
So Brunson, what was it like to be fathered by this man?
It was a blessing. There's a couple pieces here that my dad's pretty modest, and even getting him to come on the show was a bit of an effort. It's not something he wanted to do or felt comfortable doing. My dad, my whole life, has always said, I don't know, who knows? And it's funny because I actually believe that an expert, someone that really is good at something, will often be the first one to say, I don't really know. Who knows anymore? People that are, always young parents, I've always noticed. I've got a lot of my friends are married, and they're always chock full of parenting advice because they have a 2-year-old son, right? And it's like, okay, always when they're younger and the less experience, the more advice they have. And then often people that really know what's going on are the ones that say, who knows? We tried the best we can. Something my dad's not saying is that he's had 15 kids. So
whoa,
I am number 2 of 15 children. So that's from my mom and dad. They both together had 15 children. I'm the second oldest.
Good for you.
And
that's a blessing among blessings, man. You are rich beyond rich. That Tucker Carlson says that children are the greatest wealth a man can have, and I agree with him 100%.
Yes, and I do too.
Something that's a certainty from my perspective. Sorry, we have just a touch of lag here, so sorry if I'm talking over anybody. But something that's a definite for me is that I don't think my dad will ever die lonely, right? I saw the way that my grandpa, his father, died, and it literally, and I'm not joking, Nikki, when I tell you this, it was a revolving door of, maybe you can correct me, Dad, but 50 people constantly in and out of that house. His last 2 weeks on his deathbed, everyone just sobbing and mourning him and remembering stories and asking for last minute advice. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen, right? And how many grandkids did Grandpa have, Dad?
Oh, now you're testing
46,
me.
56?
I think 46, I believe.
That's incredible.
I could be mistaken, but right in that area. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, going back to your original question, though, I just feel like I need to kind of lay some of that groundwork because my dad won't say it about himself, but my dad has been an incredibly present father from my perspective. I mean, just the one person that always was in my corner, the one person I go to about anything, I've always had a source of, it was like having a therapist 24/7. So that office that you can see him in the background, and that's practically a temple from my perspective. Because I've spent many a Sunday afternoon crying my eyes out or pouring my heart out or sharing my deepest fears or pains or whatever, and having a father that just listened to me. And my dad is someone who's very modest, and you'll never get, I'll get I'm a little emotional, but my dad will never say, but he has a gift for making very important principles stick. And he goes off on his little rants, which can last for hours, but we love him. And he'll share an analogy and then another analogy until it sinks in, right? And it's something that's really important. And he'll go as many times as he has to go until like that lesson sinks in. And so for me, I just had a father that every Sunday, most of my entire life, especially in my teenage years, I got pulled into that office for at least 20, 30 minutes, and we would just talk. And whatever came up. And it was completely defining for my entire life. Everything that's happened in my life, I can trace back most of it to being able to tell my dad anything and get very sound advice from someone who not only was raised by a good man himself, but also had a lot of life experience. So anyways, that's my perspective.
Well, Cameron, I see that you've got books in bookcases behind you, and so do I. This is my actual office. This isn't a virtual background. So books seem to be important to you. Talk a bit about that.
Well, I love to learn. I wouldn't say that it's my first gift to be able to absorb information, but I've always been really drawn towards principles of success, of greatness. I'm inspired by the great people in history and what they were able to accomplish, and the potential of the human being. And I've always been striving for more understanding for myself, primarily so that I can be a better leader. That's one of my greatest goals, is to be a good father. And and Brunson's very kind in what he says, but I've had, it's been a life that I haven't, how do I say it? That I've wondered if I was up to the task most of the time, and so just did my best with the understanding that I had, and the things that I've listened to or read always are motivated by a desire to become better myself, so that I can be a better father.
That's fabulous. So tell me a little bit about the books and the great men of history that have inspired you.
So probably the greatest is Scripture. That's the most, what I would consider the greatest books in history are Scriptures, and the principles that are taught, and the understandings, and the display of human nature, and the way to kind of see everything play out of what happens when people act a certain way before God, and when they act another way before God, and those kind of patternings have been just really, I would say that's the keystone of everything that I believe and understand. And then there's other books that have just been, I've been inspired by, books of Stephen Covey and many other people like that. Had the pleasure of knowing him personally, and so that one was one that was very. He was one that I was particularly inspired by. I did, yes, yeah. He was a family.
What was he like,
fan. Man? He was someone who I saw practice what he preached, and that was always so inspiring to me, because he would he had an ability to just be so incredibly present with you that you felt like you were the most important person in the world when he would talk to you. And so he's probably one of, outside of my father, one of the most inspiring people that I know.
His book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is one of the seminal books in the personal development space of all time. It was the biggest selling personal development book of the 90s. And I got to tell you, he was one of the people I followed early on in my life and in my career. So to meet someone who knew him personally is a cool thing. It's a very, very cool
thing. Too. His sister was his secretary. So, both his sisters were his personal secretary. So if you ever read 7 Habits, you'll see his sisters' names are in that book, because he would dictate, if I understand correctly the story, he would dictate to Heather and Shirley, and they would write down. So they effectively wrote the 7 Habits as he would dictate it to them. And so that's
cool, man.
I think the whole family cool. It's funny. It's quoted often in the Smith family that all the lessons, that's habit 3 and that's habit 4. And I think it was a big part of our family culture, actually.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you're a Seven Habits family.
Yeah.
I would say
yeah,
more
I mean,
than most. So yeah, it was almost doctrine in the family was to try to incorporate some of those lessons. And I think all of us, for whatever reason, we all gravitated toward it. I've always felt a really deep kinship with that book because not only did it feel familiar, but I felt like it was modeled well in our family. We're as flawed as anybody, but I think everyone strived to seek first and understand. Everyone strived to sharpen the saw. Everyone strived to do these, other habits. And so it was very impactful, I think, in all of our development.
So, Cameron, what are you reading right now?
well, right now I am actually reading a book by Byron Katie, which I'm finding very interesting. I'm just barely getting started into it. And she's had an amazing life experience, according to my understanding, and just getting started into that. It's Loving What Is the name of the book that I've just started recently. So I'm not into it far enough to sound educated about it, but I've enjoyed what I've heard so far, or what I've read so far.
One of my mentors is a big Byron Katie fan. I bought her book. I've never read it. It's
Okay.
I buy books faster than I can read them, and I read 100 books a year. So that just tells you something about me and my relationship with books. I'm a bookaholic. So, Brunson, what are you reading these days?
I'm a big rereader, honestly. I think the books that I tend to reread the most are, and this is connected to me and my father's faith, the Book of Mormon. We're LDS Mormon, or whichever you want to call it.
Sure.
That one comes up quite a bit. I read that one just kind of sporadically through. I'm rereading Seven Habits. I'm reading a lot of books on marketing right now. So the YouTube formula is one I'm reading right now that's really quite interesting. So I'm kind of really big on that. Funny enough, I read a lot of fantasy too. So I love, if you've ever read Brandon Sanderson.
No, I don't know. I don't know his work. I'm a little more old school. Robert Heinlein is more my speed, man.
Well, I've actually enjoyed a lot of these because I read a lot of self-help books and I like them. I like some of these other books, and there's a mix, right? Some of them are just complete fluff, and the ones that I've really enjoyed, Brandon Sanderson's just a phenomenal author for me. But I reference him constantly. Oh, it's like in the book when he does this, and it parallels a unique situation that you wouldn't have in normal life, but he can paint it in a fantasy scenario to show a very important life lesson or a very significant idea. And so he does it purposely. So in his books, he showcases almost every mental illness. Like one of his main protagonists is an actual hard addict, alcoholic. And you can see, I mean, it's not showing some fluffy, like, oh, he beat alcoholism and it was over. He relapses over and over and over again, but keeps on crawling back out of the hole. Right. And so I love his books for that reason, because they really show a lot of human nature, but it puts in a big giant this fantasy scenario. So it's kind of fun to read because of the adventure of it. But his characters are actually based a lot on people who really struggle. So I think he must have people in his life who are addicts, and people who are schizophrenic, and people who have, multiple personality disorder. And like all of those things are in his books, and they're scattered all throughout. And you see a lot of sickness, but how they handle it is really cool. So anyways, I've loved reading those books too.
Brandon Sanderson. Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
I'm really big into Robert Heinlein's books.
What did he write? I don't really know those.
Well, he died in 1988, so it's before your time to be sure. But his most famous books are Starship Troopers, that became a famous movie. He also wrote a book called The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. He wrote Have Gun Will Travel. And he also wrote Stranger in a Strange Land. And the term grok, which is used by Elon Musk as the name for his AI system on X, is something that Robert Heinlein came up with and used for the first time in his book, Stranger in a Strange Land. Stranger in a Strange Land is
a weird word. I was like, who came up with grok? So that's from that book then.
Yeah. Robert Heinlein and Isaac Asimov are considered to be the two greatest science fiction fantasy writers of all time.
I've heard of Isaac Asimov. I haven't heard of the other guy, so yeah, I'll have to look up his stuff. That's really cool.
Oh, buddy, go check out the Starship Troopers movie too, man. It's fun. Cameron, you know Robert Heinlein.
I don't, other than just what you said. I recognize the Starship Trooper name, but I don't think I've read those. No.
All right. Well, if you're not into science fiction or fantasy, maybe it's not for you. But his books are spectacular, like absolutely spectacular.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm reading a few books myself right now. I'm reading the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need. I'm reading the Bible, but I've been reading the Bible for the last 3 years. And I'm reading a book called The 3% Man by Corey Wayne. I just picked up a detective story written in the 60s by an author named John MacDonald. It's based on a character he created called Travis McGee. So those are fun books for me. I love to read. I love to learn. I love reading fiction. I think fiction ennobles the soul. But it's a cool thing to see a father and a son on a podcast together, and they're both readers. It really is a cool thing.
Well, my dad will underplay this, but I've never seen a guy that listens to more audiobooks. So he's got an extensive Audible library. I mean, he's got a library.
Wow. I am more of a listener than a reader. I would like to read more than I do, but I end up listening an awful lot as well. So,
well, and he's on a good book when all of a sudden he holds an impromptu family council. It's a Tuesday night at 6 p.m. and all of a sudden he's like, "All right, everyone, circle up." And next thing you know, we're talking about gut flora.
I love it.
Yeah, we're talking about gut flora health for 4 hours. So,
oh my God. That's awesome.
It is a tremendous variety, but it's kind of funny because my dad will read a book and this goes back to the way my dad's brain works. I think is that he reads a book and it sits there and it just stews, right? And then he'll find a way to explain it in a very simple way, at least from my perspective, right? There's always a good analogy. It's kind of like when you're climbing a mountain and it's always that, right? And so, whenever my dad gets whenever there's a good book, you will know about it because somehow we're all making dinner and then my dad he'll be sharing those ideas, and that's just a very big part of our family dinner culture. Was Dad's read a good book, and we're going to hear about all the ideas in it. Sometimes we loved it, and other times we didn't, but we were hearing about it anyway. So
that's good, man. I love it. So, Cameron, what's the biggest mistake you've made as a father?
That's a great question. I think the biggest mistake I have made and make is not listening enough. I understand the concepts of seek first to understand and everything like that, but as a father, you feel this pressure to always teach, and I think Brunson could probably understand this as well as anyone. A lot of times I teach more than I listen, and so that's something that's an ongoing battle for me that I'm still working on is being more of a listener and understanding from their perspective more than projecting my perspective on them of what I think is the right way or the right path. I found that by doing that, it's less effective than just listening to them and talking with them.
Cool. Brunson, what's the biggest mistake you've made as a son?
Oh, do you want to list them chronologically or alphabetically?
Nope, just the biggest one.
I don't know if I could pinpoint one thing in particular that stands out, but certainly a few things come to mind. I'd say one thing that comes to mind is that every time that I've been so convinced that I had it right, my dad's a pretty wise guy. And I think we have very different personalities. Me and my dad see the world very differently in a lot of ways. but I think that I tend to be a bit more of an arrogant person, right? And so my dad will have a lot of wisdom to share, and my cup is too full. And I have, I could give you a long list of times how to come back full circle. You know what, Dad? Like that was right all along. 5 years ago, you told me this. I had to go touch the stove 15 times. Realized it was hot after all. Sure enough, had I just been a little more humble to listen, a little more humble to just tune in, I think I could have avoided a lot of pain. I would say that's probably the biggest one that comes to my mind. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure my dad could point to other ones, but from my perspective, yeah.
Well, Mark Twain said once that he was absolutely astonished by how much smarter his dad got from the time he was 18 to the time he was 25. He's absolutely astonished. So, the arrogance of youth is not unique to you, Brunson. I'll tell you that right now. I had it. Every son's had it. That's for darn sure.
Well, and something changes for sure. And you talk about 25, and now we have pretty good data on that. That's when the frontal lobe kind of fully settles in. And it's true. I mean, I remember as an 18-year-old, I just didn't really believe I would actually get old. Like intellectually, I'm like, sure, yeah, I'll get old, but I didn't in my emotions, I didn't believe that. So I behaved in a way that was like, I have no consequences. I'm invincible. I remember when I was 18, I told everyone I'll be a billionaire by the time I was 28 or something like that. I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. Like it's a certainty, right? And there was no question in my mind that was going to happen. And I chose a lot of crazy different paths. And again, it's just so like such high certainty. And then something does shift around 25. And I'm only 28 now, so I'm still very young, but it was a radical shift where I'm like, oh no, my joints will give out on me. Like playing these sports may not be good long-term for me. Whereas a kid, it's like, no, somehow it'll work itself out. And you kind of believe that bravado of youth. Right. And, yeah, there's something different. And that's kind of where, we talk about not listening to my father. Like that's a big part of it, right? Was when you're young and your brain hasn't developed yet. I think that what they say actually develops in the frontal lobe. A very specific symptom is that your ability to perceive long-term consequence does not exist until you're 25. You can intellectualize it, you can somewhat understand it, but it doesn't emotionally sink in until 25. Yes, you will get old. Yes, you rack up credit card debt. It'll come back to bite you. There's certain things that just don't exist in your brain as an actual reality until you're 25. So I think that's actually kind of a funny little piece that, yeah, something does change in a big way. People get a lot smarter and you're like, oh, well, there might've been some wisdom there. So yeah.
That's very good. That's very perceptive. I did not realize that, and thank you for teaching me that. I'm just writing that down because I think it's noteworthy. Okay, Cameron, what's the thing about your son that you admire the most?
Oh, I just love that he has such a mind and such a passion for learning. He's been just amazing at his desire for just improving himself, learning more, becoming better. He's constantly striving for better in his life, and whether it be health or fitness or intellect. I just really admire how passionate he is about improving what he's been given.
Cool. Brunson, what do you admire the most about your father?
My dad is a very loyal person. There are a lot of things I could say, but I would say that for me, and this is because I'm, from my selfish perspective, my dad has been through hell and back with me. And people that listen to my podcast, I hint at certain things, but I've had some pivotal moments in my life. I shared with a friend recently that I was trying to rethink, again, I have to find my own path, rethink my whole life. And everyone's different. I don't judge anyone that chooses a different path, but I called my dad and I was just not an easy son. I was kind of a pain in the butt for a long time. I was a very difficult person to be around, and my dad just stuck with me, and he just kept fighting with me through this whole thing. And this has happened my whole life. This 28 years of me being, and I've got certain gifts, right? But I've got a lot of major weaknesses, and one of them is that I'm just kind of a free spirit. and I'm just a little bit, sometimes I feel like a butterfly in a hurricane, and my dad is with me, has been with me every step of the way. He just does not abandon me, even when I'm just flying off the rails. So there was a moment where I think he gave me a piece of advice that it had been very easy for father to be like, hey, listen, you know what? You won't listen to me. You're being obstinate. Go do your own thing and then come back when you're ready to actually learn. And that didn't happen. And I'm really grateful, because at that time I had some critical decisions to make about substances, right? Like I was at that age where all my friends are partying and doing all these drugs and, and alcohol. And for my background, we don't drink in our family.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm kind of rethinking these things. And I'm, again, not judging anyone that does, or whatever. Everyone's path is different, but I've seen a lot of those friends that I spent time with burn their lives to the ground chasing something, chasing a drug or whatever. And I'm really grateful I had a father during that time who's like, hey, just whatever you want to do is fine, but do me a favor and just keep those things out of your life just for a little bit. And he said, will you do that for me? Sure. And I look back, I'm like, holy smokes. I have a bunch of friends that were my age, in my same demographic. A lot of them really struggle, severe addictions. And there's me with none of those things. And I'm just like, man, what a cool blessing it was that I had a father that was patient enough with me through all of my crazy, and to give me the right advice at just the right time. And that's one that I just I could not have foreseen at that age how destructive those things could have been in my life. Yeah. And I'm grateful to have that influence. And yeah, someone that was loyal enough to put up with my crap while I sorted that stuff out.
All right. Great. That's fantastic. Okay, Cameron. What's one thing you want to tell Brunson that he's currently not seeing that you really want him to see? It's one thing he needs to improve. If he sees it, it'll be a game changer for him.
Well, that's a great question. But the thing that comes to mind just right off the top is that he is awesome, and I am proud of him. And I think he maybe has gone through life thinking, "Am I enough? Am I enough to meet up to your expectations? Have I been enough? Or I can't be enough." And I just want him to know that he is enough. He's all he needs to be, and that I'm still by him all the way, and I admire him more than he knows.
All right, great. Now give me a harder one. That was nice, but it was soft. Give me something real. Give me something real.
Oh boy, something that I wish he knew.
Yeah, a hard truth.
Hard truth. Boy, I don't know if I can pull up anything right off the top of my mind, but I think he's been, cautious about the idea of marriage and so forth, and wondering if that's a tough nut to crack, to find the right person to share his life with, and I just believe that it's more about being the right person than finding the right person. And I think that's what I would say this time.
So, said maybe a little more directly, get off your keister and find a good woman and get married already.
There you go.
The reason Nikki's having trouble pulling up a lot of stuff is I think he usually tells me this. I mean, my dad's a lot of things, but he will speak what's on his mind. So
Good. All right.
This is not the first time I've heard this, but
all right. Same question for you, for your dad. What's one thing you want to give to him that he's not seeing that could make his life better?
This is an interesting question, because you would hope that you wouldn't have to say it in this, you'd hope you've already said it. And I think that I've hopefully communicated this to my dad anyways, but, and I hope that, any other fathers that are listening, I don't know what it's like to be a dad, but I know what it's like to be a son right now. And I'm in the heat of that. Right. And I'm sure that my life has taught me that as things move on, you forget what it's like to be young again. I forget how my younger siblings feel often, right? I have a very large family, so I've got my youngest sister is 6, I believe, or 5. That's how
5.
many
Yeah.
kids are in this family. Yeah, she's 5, right? I don't even know the ages anymore, but huge age gap. So I get to see a pretty wide range, and I'm close to these people, right? So I realize they forget. And so this is pulled from limited perspective, but I think that everyone forgets. All fathers forget. I think my dad does this as well. Like, his kids just worship the ground that he walks on. And I think that we don't show that because there's a need for sons to want to feel like they carve their own path. We were reading my grandpa's journal recently. My dad's father, he said the same thing. He said, it was really tough. I felt like I lived in David's shadow. So my grandpa Alban felt like he lived in his father's shadow, and all he wanted to do was to be his own man. I think that I have a really cool heritage. I mean, and I could tell you stories, but these were good men. And you've shared, Nikki, about your father. I mean, it's a similar thing. I have generations of good men. I mean,
Awesome.
Sure, they're flawed, but holy smokes, they're good people. And I think that if I were to say something, it's that I think that I do a lot of things to prove my independence, but at the end of the day, I just want to be like my dad. I think most sons feel that way. So they have good fathers.
That's awesome. And what's the hard truth you want to tell your dad?
I think that my dad's, it's the same thing. It's kind of, he's enough, right? I feel like, and I think this is not unique. I think this is not unique to all fathers. I think all fathers think, man, was I good enough dad? Absolutely. Absolutely. And still is. And my dad absolutely still is a good enough dad. And like, I think there's the assumption that maybe because I do all the crazy things that I do, and I'm always flying from one country to the next, that I don't see the value, but I think I really do. I think a lot of fathers forget that they are just absolutely just loved by their kids and really respected. So yeah, that would be kind of the hard truth. And it's, that might seem like not as pointed as maybe what you're maybe pointing toward, but I think that is the one that comes to my mind the strongest, is absolutely is enough of a father. So
amen. Men, this was
Thank
a
you.
unique conversation. I don't believe there's a lot of podcasters that have done something like this. It's a bit of living history, as it were. And I thank you both for coming here and opening your hearts out to me and to those who listen. God bless you both for being willing to do that.
Well, thank you. It was a nice opportunity, nice to visit with you, and thank you for your time.
It was an
appreciate it.
absolute
Thank you.
pleasure. Brunson, man, this was good. Glad you made it happen.
Yes, sir. Well, interviewing two people is tough. My hat goes off to you. There's a lot to balance there. So I think you did a phenomenal job of that. So
I appreciate it. I do. And I'd like to see more podcasters bring fathers and sons on their shows and have these types of conversations, because I think all sons can benefit from listening to fathers and sons interact. And I think all
it's under
fathers,
attack, man.
all
It's
fathers can
actively
benefit from it
attacked.
too.
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
It's a big thing that everyone's. I mean, I'll share another thought here really quickly, but we've got a crisis in our nation. I was telling my dad this earlier. We have a population crisis, and a large part of it, I think, is because men are demonized so heavily, and fatherhood is treated as a joke in most society. You watch any random movie, he's the guy with the white socks and sandals who's only good at barbecuing. That's his only contribution to the world.
Yeah.
And that's how fathers are portrayed in our media, and it's not as strong people. They're portrayed as the goofy,
As dolts, as doofuses, as idiots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all. That's what we're fed constantly. We're fed that is just, that's a dad. Yeah, your dad jokes, and and it's dad jokes are great, but like that's not what that's not how I see. And I'm grateful, like I said, I have this legacy, and I see strong men who kind of face the storm, and that to me is a father, not the guy who's just can crack a witty joke every now and again, and is good in front of the grill, right? So I totally agree. I think that's a huge thing that's missing in our society, and I think it's having actual repercussions that are so serious that I listen to these people that are experts that talk about this, that we are in 100 years, if we don't correct, we won't have a population. Our population decline is so radical, we're going to see serious population collapse. And I think a lot of it comes down to fatherhood. I really believe that. I believe there's a serious dynamic problem with fathers, and they're not respected. And as a result, their sons are raised as effectively weak men. and they don't go out there and, and create families themselves that are strong. And so, harkening back to my own call back, then you go find a wife. But
yeah. I was about to say, go do your job.
yeah, exactly right.
Go do your job. Go get a wife. And I'm in agreement with you. That's what's happening in the world right now. But also, additionally, there's hope. I mean, in America, President Trump was reelected. And that really sends a strong message to those of us that believe in the importance of men, manhood, and masculinity, that plenty of people share our views, and there's going to be somebody in the White House at the highest levels who absolutely embodies that. He's a flawed man, as you say, but he's a good man, and I believe God Almighty spared him when an assassin tried to take his life. And I believe that since he was spared by God, he's been tasked with a big mission. And that mission is to remake the country and to help bring respect back to men and manhood. I really believe that with all my heart.
Amen.
Didn't he write a foreword to your book? Is that right?
He did not write a foreword to it, but he endorsed it. He endorsed one of the books I've written, which is called The Great Patriot Boycott Book, which is a list of America's most patriotic companies. And that is his endorsement on Truth Social. It's not because of me. It's because of my co-author, Wayne Allen Root. He doesn't know me from Adam, but he knows Wayne quite well. And I'm going to actually put it in my LinkedIn bio and in my other bios. That I'm a best-selling author, and my work has been endorsed by President Donald J. Trump. I got to say, I think that's going to be good for my brand.
Yeah, it will be.
So,
well, I don't know how many Kamala supporters would love. Sorry, I'm getting super political, and I hope I'm not making an
It's all
opinion, but I
good.
don't know how many Kamala supporters would love this whole episode. I'm going to go out on a limb and just say it might be a little more few than.
Well, listen,
Just my
good,
guess, so
good,
you might have
good,
your audience right there.
good marketing and good messaging repels as well as it attracts, and it's important to repel the wrong people and attract the right people. So I'm good with it. I'm all good with that.
Well, and there's a thing with a lot of men where it's a suffer in silence, right? That's something of a masculine instinct, right? It's like, no, you keep your suffering to yourself. You don't sit there and blab about it, which is why I think a lot of this stuff has happened, like you've been talking about. I really do believe that. It's because good men are like, no, I'm the punching bag of society, but that's okay. You know what I mean? I'm not here to go be a victim. I'm not here to go and toot my own horn and say how bad my life is. A lot of men just take it, and that's a masculine thing. And that's why we're like, oh, well, men aren't suffering because they don't say anything. Like, well, that's it.
Well,
most men don't, right? So,
well, there's a lot of truth to what you're saying, and there's a lot of truth to what I said about President Trump and a renewal and a revival of the American masculine spirit. And I do this podcast to uplift men, manhood, and masculinity. You heard what I said. My catchphrase, welcome to the Sovereign Man podcast, where we aim to make men masculine again. And that's what we're aiming to do. And if I may say so, I think we're doing a good job. So let's keep it up.
That's awesome.
Let's keep it up, and let's keep having these types of conversations. And I, once again, thank you both for coming. God bless you, and God bless America, and God bless all men.
amen.
Thank you. Amen. Yep.
And
God bless you.
That's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.